flashlight, help measure, do the sketches, did the brief descriptions of the items, whatever you needed.
Perhaps we can see the next board. Maybe we can just shuttle this down so that the jurors on the end can see it. Excuse me, I want to ask you a question about this. All right, well,
All right, Ms. Mazzola, could you try to keep your voice up, please?
Ms. Mazzola, I'm sorry, I forgot about this. Item number 9. What item is that?
That is one of the gloves.
Is that the glove that came from the Rockingham location?
Make sure. Yes.
And in terms of the physical collection on number 9, who did the physical collection on that?
Mr. Fung.
But the board says Fung Mazzola.
Correct.
And did you participate in any way in the documentation and other aspects of the collection procedure with respect to 9?
I helped measure.
All right, thank you, counsel.
May I just approach for a second? Thank you.
You may.
I'd like to ask you about stains 55 and 56. Can you tell us which stains those were?
Yes, those were stains that were collected from the shoe prints that were at Bundy.
Who did the physical swatching on 55 and 56?
Mr. Fung.
And on this board it says Fung Mazzola.
Correct.
Did you participate, however, in the collection procedure on those stains?
Yes, I did.
And on the property reports, who did they indicate was responsible for collecting these items at Bundy?
Both Mr. Fung and myself.
And when you say you participated, in what way in the collection process?
Measuring, things like that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Mazzola, I'd like to turn to another issue at Rockingham, the Rockingham location. That's the crime scene identification checklist. Now, you said that you wrote your name in the column that says officer in charge.
Correct.
Now, did you somehow let that designation go to your head and run around the crime scene telling people that you were the officer in charge and ordering people around and the like?
Oh,
No.
Did it affect you in any way that that your name was on that column?
Not in any way, no.
Did it affect your performance in any way that your name was in that column?
No.
And could have it affected your performance in terms of the way that you swatched stains at the Rockingham location?
sustained.
Did it affect your performance in swatching stains?
No.
Now, that item was written in pencil,
Yes, it was.
so you could have erased it?
Overruled.
Yes.
And
Oh, I'm sorry. Sustained, it is speculative, but the answer that it's in pencil, the jury can figure that out for themselves.
did you
Jury should
erase it?
disregard that last question and answer.
Did you erase it?
No.
Why not?
It never seemed to be an issue.
Were you ever at any time trying to downplay or minimize your involvement at the crime scene?
No.
Now, in the foyer area of the Rockingham location, do you recall seeing any other drops in that location other than the 3 that were collected as stain 12?
No, not at the time.
Okay. And with respect to those 3 drops that were collected as stain 12, who decided to collect them as a single stain, single item?
Mr. Fung.
Now, you were asked whether you could see or you saw any blood on the banister. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to mark as people's next in order. It's Exhibit 201,
People's 201.
a photograph of what appears to be the banister.
All right, have you shown that to Mr. Neufeld?
I thought I had. I'll show it to him again. On the back, I'd like to write 201, just
Yes.
All right. I can't put it on the Almo. Ms. Mazzola, direct your attention to the photograph that's been marked People's 201. Does that appear to be the banister that leads up from the foyer area of the Rockingham location?
Yes, it does.
And does this appear to depict the way it looked on the 13th?
Yes.
Was that a dark banister?
It was medium to darkish wood.
And would have it been difficult to see little flakes or specks of blood on that banister?
Rephrase the question.
How easy would have it been for you to have seen tiny little flakes or specks of blood on that banister?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Okay. With respect to the coloration that dried blood typically has in your experience, how does it compare to the banister?
Based on beyond her scope of expertise, Your Honor.
Overruled.
They would be sort of similar in color.
And would you expect to see the same degree of contrast of specks of blood on the banister as off a white wall, say?
No.
Thank you. Now, with respect to the stain on item number 11, what side of the house was that collected from?
That was collected on the side of the house near the guest quarters.
Was that the same side of house where the glove number 9 was collected by Mr. Fung?
Yes, it was.
And in the what we refer to as, I think, the walkway area?
There is a pathway back there.
All right. And that was on what type of an item, stain 11?
It was on a wire.
Now, could you actually see a physical stain?
I personally couldn't.
So what did you do when you were collecting from that area?
Objection, Your Honor. Through the sidebar.
Did you?
Wait, I'm not asking for any test results, but what did you physically do when you were collecting from that area?
I took a control from an area as far away from that area where the stain was supposed to be. I swabbed the area, took swatches of the area that contained the stain area.
But you couldn't see it?
I personally couldn't know.
Now, in the afternoon when you left the Rockingham location, did you have a plastic trash bag in your hand when you left for the last time?
Yes.
And did you have an independent recollection of that prior to seeing a videotape that depicted that scene?
I knew that I had carried out a plastic trash bag.
Now, you said that at some point you figured out that the package containing the vial of blood was in the plastic trash bag. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when did you figure that out?
I realized that the next day at the lab in evidence processing.
How?
The bag was on the table and it contained the 2 items that I remembered that Mr. Fung and myself had collected, and the gray envelope was also there.
Did you think that there was any significance up to that period of time, exactly what transpired with respect to that blood vial between the time that it was received and the time that you saw it on the morning of the 14th?
No, not really.
Do you handle blood vials all the time in your occupation?
In toxicology, we handle blood quite a bit.
And when you say handle, what do you mean by that?
Physically open the vials, take samples out, work the samples, handle the samples.
So you mean some sort of physical manipulation with the sample?
Correct.
And did you ever do any handling of the blood vial sample in this case, in that sense?
No.
Now, you said that you collected, and Mr. Fung collected an item 15 and 16.
Correct.
And when is it that you documented in the crime scene identification checklist those 2 items?
It was the next day.
Why was it the next day?
Because our notes were locked in the back of the truck when we left Rockingham for the last time, and didn't have a chance to do it at that time.
Why didn't you document those when you got back to the laboratory in the evening of the 13th?
Well, our main priority was to get the blood swatches drying.
So then, with respect to items 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, when was the documentation on those items done in the crime scene identification checklist?
They were done the following day,
On the 14th?
on the 14th.
Where did the 5 o'clock time period come from with respect to the collection on 15 and 16?
That was the time that I had thought that we had collected those 2 items, 15 and 16.
At the time of the Griffin hearing, did you believe that you had left shortly after 5 o'clock?
That's what I had believed, yes.
And when did you learn that that wasn't the case?
One was from the videotapes, and another was from the envelope that contained the blood sample from Mr. Simpson.
What was on the envelope that caused you to believe that you hadn't left shortly after 5?
There was a time written down that it had been received.
Now, perhaps we could see the exhibit that's been marked as People's 186 for identification. Starting with the scene where Ms. Mazzola is leaving the location. Now, at 17:11:53, you are putting the items that you had collected and your collection kits back in the vehicle.
Correct.
But you believe that 15 and 16 had not been collected at this time?
Correct.
If you could just take a look at the package that Mr. Fung's holding in his hands. I know you've seen it before. Maybe we can stop for a second. Now, with respect to the package that Mr. Fung was holding in his hands, was that consistent with any other item that you collected or Mr. Fung collected in your presence at the Rockingham location after 5/11?
No.
Okay, let's continue. Let's just stop again for a second. So just to be more specific, without telling us what they were, is that item consistent with 15 or 16?
No.
Let's continue. For the record, I'm sorry, Your Honor. For the record, I stopped just after we'd finished the two sequences of Mr. Fung in the foyer. Let's just stop for a second. We're at 174253. I believe it's 10. And Ms. Mazzola, with respect to the package that we've previously asked you about, the trash bag, is the heft of that bag consistent with 1516 or the little cards that were contained in the driveway, the photo ID cards?
Objection, Your Honor. The picture speaks for itself. I don't think she's qualified to comment on the heft of the bag.
Overruled. She's carrying it.
It does not appear to be consistent with 1516 or the number cards.
Now, when you say appear, are you referring to you're looking at the photograph?
Correct.
And what aspect of the photograph are you looking at?
The outline that is shown towards the front of the bag.
During the sequence where you're walking out of the...
Objection, Your Honor, move to strike. That's not heft now. We're talking about describing the form.
And is this the sequence where you're walking out of what appears to be the gate area that leads up into the Rockingham driveway?
Correct.
Now, in terms of weight, when you were carrying the bag, did the weight appear to be consistent with only 1516 and the little cards?
It appeared to be a little heavier, but at the time I didn't think much about it.
Did you think that did you have any reason to believe this was going to be of any importance whatsoever later on?
No.
Okay, let's just finish up this little last segment. Your Honor, perhaps before I can ask my next series of questions, we can approach to clarify the scope of the permissible questioning,
What area?
15 and 16.
All right, with the court reporter. Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to the Bundy crime scene. You were asked about a white object on Mr. Goldman. Do you recall seeing any white object on Mr. Goldman?
A sheet, coroner's sheet.
When you were asked about a white object by the defense, is that what you were referring to?
Yes.
And when you say coroner's sheet, can you describe that a little bit more for us? What is it?
Just white.
Just a large white blanket type item.
Correct.
Did you get a clear look at that?
Not a clear look, no.
What type of a look at that did you get?
It's a brief look as they were bringing him out.
Okay. Now, you were asked about trace evidence in connection with the cap and the hat and the glove. Did you examine those items at all at the scene to see whether they had trace evidence?
No.
Do you examine items at the scene before you collect them for the purposes of seeing whether they have trace or biological evidence, such as those?
Biological evidence such as blood, for the most part you can readily see. Trace evidence, you wouldn't be able to really see it.
But do you try to attempt a close physical examination of the items such as the glove and the cap prior to collecting them?
No.
Why not?
Because you run the risk, if you're examining it, of disturbing trace evidence.
Now, I'd like to give you a hypothetical. If you assumed, for the purposes of this hypothetical, that the cap had hairs and fibers on it, the hairs being consistent with the defendant, and a fiber being consistent with the bronco, but that the glove did not have any such items of trace evidence on it, then would the fact that you did not change gloves in between those items have had any effect in terms of contaminating the glove?
Objection to proper hypothetical.
Sustained.
Would there have been any significance to not changing the gloves between the cap and the glove?
Objection still, unless it's in connection with the last
Sustained.
question.
I don't understand the grounds for the...
Grounds is that it's an inappropriate question for this particular person based upon her expertise.
You have been trained, you've received some training at SID in terms of the unintentional transfer of trace evidence, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said that you did not change gloves between the cap and the glove, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, based upon your training and what you've been told at the SID Academy, would there be any problem for contamination or cross-contamination if the hat contained hair and bronco fiber consistent with the bronco, but the glove did not contain that kind of trace evidence?
Objection again, improper hypothetical.
Sustained.
Thank you. Now, when you were looking at the snippet of videotape that showed an item being passed between yourself and Mr. Fung, what color did that item appear to be?
It appeared to be a tannish color.
Was it consistent in appearance with the color of the eyeglass envelope?
No.
Now, when you had that item in front of you, I believe it was the item number 39, the eyeglass envelope, and it was unpackaged. Did Mr. Neufeld attempt to touch the glasses with his bare hands?
He made a move towards them, yes.
What did you do when that happened?
Advised him it wouldn't be a wise idea.
Did he in fact touch them?
No.
And when you saw the bindle that was contained in that item, maybe I can have that. I think it's exhibit number 39. When you saw the bindle that was contained in that item, was that a bindle that either you or Mr. Fung created?
No.
Either of the bindles?
No.
Did you recognize any of the handwriting on those two bindles?
No, I did not.
Did you recognize the initials H, I think it was CL,
At that time, no.
or when you saw them in front of you on the witness stand?
I did not.
To your knowledge, is there anyone by the name of Henry Lee that works at the laboratory?
Appropriate for this witness.
Oral.
No one by that name works at the laboratory.
But, yes, this does exceed the scope, counsel.
What?
The Bindles matter does exceed the scope.
Well, it goes to the issue of the contents of the item.
As to the envelope, yes, you may proceed.
Just so there's no ambiguity, when I was talking about the bindles, can you point out for us what items constitute the bindles?
The bindles are these small items here. These-
Appear to be folded up pieces of paper within the plastic envelope.
And to your knowledge, are items of evidence at SID made available for inspection and testing even by the defense?
Objection on beyond the scope.
Sustained.
Do you have any personal knowledge of everything that happened to this eyeglass envelope between the time that it was booked and the time that you saw it on the witness stand?
No.
You said that you took a look at the glasses that were inside of the envelope when you were back at the laboratory.
Objection, that wasn't in testimony.
Overruled.
Not back at the laboratory. no.
Where was that?
At the scene,
Oh,
Bungie.
it was at the scene.
Correct.
And can you describe for us specifically how you did it, how you did that mechanically?
The envelope was not securely sealed, and through the opening, I could see a pair of glasses.
Did you remove the item?
No.
When you were looking at it, through what part of the envelope were you looking at it?
Through the back flap area, which was not securely sealed.
Did you open it in some fashion to make it wider so that you could see better? Or
No.
so how narrow was the slit through which you were looking at this item in
Objection,
the envelope?
slit.
Rephrase it.
How narrow was the opening?
I'm not positive about how narrow the opening was.
Can you give us an estimate?
Wide enough to see it was a pair of glasses.
Was it enough so that you could take a close inventory of the condition of the glasses?
Objection made.
Overruled.
No.
Did you do so?
No.
And did you notice at that time specifically whether the glasses were intact or not?
I did not notice if they were intact.
Now, going back to some of the training issues that were brought up, when you were receiving your academic training in the college level, university level, did you receive any academic training in the area of crime scene investigation?
Beyond the scope.
Overruled.
I did take 2 classes in crime scene investigation.
And where were those taken?
One was taken at a community college, and the other was taken at Sacramento State University.
Now, what was the nature of this training? Was it hands-on or was it more textbook, theoretical kind of training?
It was more textbook.
All right. And then you said that after you went to LAPD, you went through what you've referred to as the mini academy?
Correct.
And was the nature of that training more academic and textbook oriented or more hands-on?
That was more hands-on.
And can you describe for us the kinds of things that you went through in this hands-on training at the SID mini academy?
We learned how to take hair samples from suspects or victims, proper packaging of said items. We learned how to collect blood off of different substrates. We learned how to cast shoe prints out in dirt, which sometimes you have to do at scenes. We were taken out and we cast tire tracks. We were given demonstrations on interpreting tire tracks, their direction.
Now, when you were doing something like a tire track impression, did you do that inside the laboratory or in some outside location?
It's irrelevant.
Well, you were asked where these meetings took place. Did all of these meetings take place inside the laboratory?
No,
And you said that there was a area that's a kitchen area of the laboratory?
it is an area where we have a small kitchen. It adjoins our library / meeting room / training room.
Is the library / meeting room / training room the area where these meetings took place, the ones that were inside?
For the most part, yes.
And do you think that the fact that there's a kitchen area adjoining that meeting room somehow caused you not to learn how to collect blood stains as well as if it had taken place in a conference room?
Objection, leading.
Sorry, I was being distracted by the photographers in the back.
Excuse me.
Hold on.
I'll ask you a few,
Hold on.
the question again.
Rephrase the question.
This meeting / conference / library room, is it directly adjoining the area that's the kitchen? Is it in the same physical space?
Yes,
Right. And is there a microwave there and refrigerator and the like?
yes.
Okay. Do you think that somehow the presence of the microwave and the refrigerator caused you not to learn how to collect bloodstains as well?
Objection, leading.
Oh,
No, it had no bearing on it.
Now, you were also asked whether this occurred in a separate building. Did it?
No,
Do you think that maybe if this had occurred in a separate building, you would have learned how to collect bloodstains or other kinds of evidence better than if it occurred at the SID facility?
I don't think it would have made any difference.
Do you think that if you had learned this in a dormitory-type setting where they didn't allow you to go home between sessions, that you would have learned?
I think we're getting redundant at this point.
Okay. I probably agree with that, Your Honor.
All right. Let's move on.
Okay. Now, you said that you had a temporary job at Kern County DA's office crime lab.
Correct.
Why was that a temporary position?
It was what they called extra help criminalist. It was a temporary position, and I was just glad to get the job.
And when you say that it was a temporary position, did they have funding for a full-time position?
No, they did not have funding for a full-time position.
And for how long was it that you were hired, when you were initially hired in this temporary position?
Initially, I was hired for 9 months.
And then what happened after the 9 months?
Well, before my 9 months were up, they said they had funding for me to come back for another 9 months if I was still interested in the job.
And did you, in fact, go back for another 9 months?
Yes, I did.
Did they have any funding to continue your position after then?
No, no.
And then after that, did you begin looking for work again?
Yes, I did.
What kind of work did you want at that time?
Objection is to relevance.
Oral.
I wanted to work as a criminalist. That's what I want my career to be.
Is it your experience that the leading crime laboratories generally want people that have some previous experience in order to get a job?
Qualified to answer that question.
Oral.
The majority of laboratories we're looking for people with some experience in the field.
And then you said that you got a job at Valley Toxicology, I think? Is that correct?
Correct.
And was that a job that you wanted to stay at?
It was not a job I wanted to stay at for the next 30 years.
Okay. And when did you decide to go over to LAPD?
Well, I had taken the test for LAPD a couple of years prior to starting at Valley Toxicology, but I had heard of the budget problems, so I didn't think anything about it until I received a call asking me if I was still interested in a permanent full-time position as a criminalist with LAPD.
And when you heard that they had funding now for a position, did you decide to join LAPD, their crime lab?
Yes,
And why was that?
because it was a permanent criminalist position. LAPD had a good reputation, and
Objection, Your Honor, move to strike.
All right, we're beyond what we need to have here.
Okay, thank you.
Proceed.
Your Honor, I was going to move on to another topic now. I don't know whether the court wanted to break. It's 4 o'clock, or go or continue.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the afternoon session as far as the jury is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember all of my admonitions to you. Do not discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you, or allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Have a pleasant evening. All right, Ms. Mazzola, you may step down. You're ordered to return tomorrow morning, 8:45. Oh, got it. Thank you.